Just about a year ago, a school counsellor at Hwa Chong Institution flashed something inappropriate to an entire cohort of 16-year-old kids. Okay, I should clarify. What the counsellor flashed were fake scientific facts during a school assembly with made-up stats like 1 in 15 homosexuals are pedophiles. But as upsetting as this Hwa Chong incident is, the reality is actually even worse. For example, did you know that healthcare webinars were held in Singapore where anti-LGBT fake science was disseminated to actual healthcare professionals? Like, what the f? A lot of anti-LGBT fake science that originated in America has made its way to Singapore in recent years, seemingly with an agenda of stirring up discrimination and hate here. Thankfully though, the Singapore government has taken swift action and issued tons of correction notices to all of the fake— Nah, I'm just kidding. You really think that our government will stand up for the queer community? This is the same government that says,
we won't discriminate against LGBT people,
while at the same time censoring queerness and blocking gay people from accessing public housing until 35. So let's be real, it's up to us to defend ourselves. Hi, my name is Yusheng and I run Heckin Unicorn, and today let's tear apart the fake science that's attacking the queer community in Singapore. Exhibit 1. Katy Faust and her attack on same-sex parenting. So a bit of background on Katy Faust. She's an American anti-LGBT campaigner who spends a lot of her time trying to ban same-sex parenting in the US. Her main argument is that children of same-sex parents are scientifically proven to have worse outcomes than children of heterosexual parents, and therefore society should just ban same-sex parenting. Katy Faust's agenda found its way to Singapore when people began sharing her materials during the 377A debate last year. People were calling for a constitutional ban of same-sex parenting in Singapore based on Katy Faust's science. So let's take a look at her so-called science. By the way, there's a lot more detail that we can't fit into this video, so we've published an article that contains all of the details, all of the research and receipts. So if you're interested to check them out, you can go to this website and read up on all of the juicy details. Okay, back to Katy Faust. So her main material is a blog post she published in 2017, where she quoted 2 scientific papers by Donald Paul Salins as her evidence that same-sex parents are worse than straight parents. But there are 3 main problems with her so-called science. The first problem, she lied that those 2 journal papers were the official results of EdHealth and NHIS. Now, EdHealth and NHIS are legit, real, American, longitudinal studies. But the problem is, these 2 scientific papers she was quoting were not official results, and they were not even officially commissioned by those 2 studies. So she straight up lied about that. This is just like saying that some random sketch of King Charles is the official royal portrait. Like, just because your crap is based on something real doesn't mean that it's official. And when someone tries so hard to pass something off as official, you know that something is up. The second problem, Donald Paul Salins' papers were published in a fake scientific journal. So Salins' papers were published in the British Journal of Education, Society and Behavioural Science, or let's just call it BJBS for short. First of all, BJBS isn't even British, it's based in India. And this is quite funny because they were actually forced to change their name because too many people complained that they were trying to mislead audiences by adding British to the title. But on top of the dishonest name, we know for sure that BJBS is a fake scientific journal because we submitted a fake paper to them which they published in just 9 calendar days. Their peer review process took only 5 calendar days. The fake paper we sent to them had a shit ton of problems. For example, most of the citations are completely fabricated or completely irrelevant to the point. We also claim that we adopted the acceptance of sexual minorities scale from previous research, but that's completely made up. There were also a lot of factual and contextual errors in the paper, such as numbers not adding up to 100% in tables. We even said that our representative sample of Singaporeans are made up of 85% white people, which, if you know anything about Singapore, you know that that is not true. We even had fake authors from the illustrious University of Simisai in Singapore, which is a completely made up and fake university. BJBS doesn't do any sort of background check to verify the authors' identities or credentials, and none of their peer reviewers or editors found any of the many mistakes that we intentionally added to the fake paper. But you know what's the worst part? When they published the paper, they lied about when they received it. They backdated the paper to make it look like their peer review took them 2 months when it only took them 5 days. And this was completely unprompted. They did it on their own accord. Those 2 papers that Katy Faust quotes as her scientific evidence were published in a fake scientific journal that doesn't care if it's actual science and actively covers up for the lack of review processes. And you might say, okay, the papers are published in a fake journal, but maybe the science is actually legit. And that brings us to the third problem, which is the science in Salin's papers were obviously fake. Once again, all the details are in our article, but here are some of the highlights. To measure the health outcomes of children, Salin's used the CESD questionnaire. This questionnaire can only be used as an aggregate or combined score, but Salin's decided that he just doesn't care. So what he did was to split up this questionnaire into fragments and then perform his so-called analysis on fragments of the questionnaire as opposed to the combined or aggregate scores. Like, are we just doing things for fun now because his so-called results don't even mean anything anymore? This is the literal definition of grasping at straws. And if that's not bad enough, his main argument is that married same-sex parents are worse than unmarried same-sex parents. But his analysis did not even compare those 2 groups. So what the f*** are you talking about, Salins? Okay, let's summarize what we've found about Katy Faust. Her claims that same-sex parents are bad for children are based on fake scientific papers published in fake scientific journals, which she then misrepresents as official results of legitimate US nationwide studies. This is a person who doesn't know what she's talking about, and anyone who shares her materials are essentially being conned by a fraudster. Katy Faust? More like Katy Foul, am I right? Exhibit 2. Quentin Van Meter and his attack on transgender people. Quentin Van Meter is an American medical doctor who spreads a lot of misinformation about transgender healthcare. He made his way into Singapore through a healthcare webinar conducted in February 2021, where he presented himself as an expert on transgender healthcare to parents and healthcare professionals. Now you might say, this dude is a doctor, so he should be legit, right?
No! No!
Once again, all the full receipts are in the link, but here is a quick summary. Quentin Van Meter is the president of a fake medical association called the American College of Pediatricians, or ACPEDS. Now ACPEDS might seem legit, but it's really not. The real pediatrician association in America is the AAP, which has 67,000 members. ACPEDS only has 600 members and are actually made up of far-right, anti-LGBT, anti-abortion campaigners. ACPEDS has been denounced by many American medical associations and have been found to repeatedly misrepresent scientific papers to feed their own agenda. And in fact, ACPEDS is so radical that they are a designated hate group in the US. Examples of other groups given the same status are the KKK and neo-Nazi groups like Aryan Nations. So things are not looking great for Quentin Van Meter. This guy literally runs a hate group. But things only get worse for him because Quentin Van Meter was actually discredited as an expert on trans healthcare in an American court. This is true, he was literally officially ruled out as an expert on trans healthcare by a US court because he failed to provide fact-driven testimony in court. So most people would just die from this level of humiliation, but it seems like Quentin Van Meter is quite used to it. He continued presenting himself as an expert of trans healthcare and even made his way into a webinar here meant for healthcare professionals. The local transgender support group, Transgender Singapore, did an amazing job breaking down all of the fake science he disseminated during the webinar, so I highly recommend checking out this article. Here is a quick summary. Van Meter claimed that transitioning worsens the mental health of trans people, but the studies he cited didn't even look at trans people or transitioning at all. The current medical consensus, which was already established many years ago, is that transitioning is overwhelmingly beneficial to trans people. Van Meter also claimed that trans youth don't actually grow up to be transgender when they are adults, but the studies he cited focused more on effeminate boys and gay boys rather than trans people, so of course lah! So to summarize, Quentin Van Meter runs a fake medical association that's really a hate group. He actually got discredited as an expert on trans healthcare by a court, and from the looks of it, he can't even understand scientific journals. And this was the guy who gave a webinar in Singapore about trans healthcare to healthcare professionals. Like, are we okay? But it gets worse. He's not even the only one who did that. Enter Julie Hamilton. Exhibit 3. Julie Hamilton and her attack on transgender people. Dr. Julie Heron Hamilton presented herself as an expert on transgender children's healthcare in a webinar that targets parents and healthcare professionals in Singapore. You might ask, what is Dr. Hamilton's credentials and what makes her an expert on trans healthcare? First of all, she's not a doctor, she's not a medical doctor. She has a PhD in marriage and family therapy. And speaking of therapy, it seems like the main kind of therapy she likes to promote is conversion therapy. She used to run the USA's biggest conversion therapy organization, NARTH, and she even wrote a handbook on conversion therapy for parents who want to turn their queer children straight. We've published a lot of content that debunks conversion therapy on our blog, so you can check it out if you want to know the details, but here is a summary. Conversion therapy is a fake science that tries to convert queer people into cisgender heterosexual people, or that tries to suppress their sexuality or gender identity. The science is extremely clear. Conversion therapy does not work, does harm, and sexuality and gender identities cannot be changed. Julie Hamilton's handbook on conversion therapy is horrifying to say the least, and trigger warning here, it gets very dark. So a quarter of her handbook was written by George Reckers, whose theories on conversion therapy was based on a series of harrowing experiments he conducted in the 1970s on a 5-year-old boy called Kirk. Among other things, George Reckers instructed Kirk's parents to beat him up whenever he exhibited effeminate behavior, and so they did. Kirk's father beat him up for over 10 months. When the experiment ended, George Reckers used it as proof that homosexuality in children can be fixed. But the reality is that Kirk was still gay, and unfortunately he killed himself when he was 38. His family attributes his suicide to the series of abuse they have helped perform on him when he was just 5 years old. Kirk's experiment is featured in Julie Hamilton's handbook as an example of a successful case study of conversion therapy. But publishing a handbook that is at least partly based on child abuse isn't enough for Julie Hamilton. She has also created a video in which she spouts nonsense about homosexuality. Our article goes into the full details of a fake science, but in the interest of time, let's just say that she misrepresented facts to make her claims sound pseudo-scientific. So to summarize, Julie Hamilton, someone who promotes and practices the fake science of conversion therapy, and who seems to enjoy twisting science to fit her agenda, is somehow an expert in transgender healthcare for children? Who the f*** are we kidding? Wrapping it all up. Back in 2020, Joanna Thing and Jamie Wong came under fire after they published a video that linked the gay community to Satanism. Yet despite the horrific claims that the pair of them made in their video, what they did was perhaps less insidious than this current onslaught of fake science. Because while their beliefs were definitely hurtful and harmful, they did not try to pass them off as secular scientific facts. The use of fake science is dangerous because it repackages discriminatory beliefs as scientific facts, seemingly with the goal of encouraging people outside of their circles to engage in discrimination. Singapore has a reputation of being a rather scientifically literate country, but when we take a closer look, the cracks become obvious. LGBTQ+ people in Singapore have little to no protection, and so fake scientific facts about us get thrown around with little consequence. When fake information about COVID started spreading around, the government was very fast at stamping them out and clarifying the facts. But fake information about trans healthcare get no action from the state, even when they are disseminated to healthcare professionals. The battle against misinformation and fake science is going to be extremely difficult. For example, this video alone took about a year of on and off research, writing and editing, and it really goes to show how difficult it is to explain and break down why certain scientific facts are actually not facts. I think a useful thought exercise to find out if a conclusion is based on science or led by bias is to consider how we would act if the science concerns another community instead of the queer community. For example, the people who shared Katy Faust's fake science on same-sex parenting weren't just sharing them as fun facts, they used them to push for a constitutional ban on same-sex parenting. Would they have acted the same way if the science didn't compare parents of different sexualities but parents of different races? Would they feel justified to call for a ban on parenting based on race instead of based on sexuality? I don't think so. If the same science doesn't justify the same action across all different types of community groups, then it suggests that You're attacking one particular group not because the science justifies it, but because you have your own personal bias against that group. In the example of Quentin Van Meter and Julie Hamilton, what if instead of transgender healthcare, they were experts in another field of medicine like childhood asthma? What standards would we hold against such experts? What if the expert isn't even a medical doctor? Or what if they were previously discredited as an expert on childhood asthma? Would we still listen to them and trust what they say? I know that this video is really long, so if you're still here, thank you for watching it. Please share this video if you have learned something new, something useful, something interesting, or if you want to spread the awareness of how fake science can look like in Singapore. And don't forget to follow us and support us by buying our merch if you can. We are a small queer brand based in Singapore, and we try to do a lot more than just create cute pride merch. We are vocal about LGBTQ+ issues in Singapore, and we have written about issues such as discrimination in schools, conversion therapy, and much more. We also give back to the community by donating to LGBT support organizations and also by organizing queer events and exhibitions. But the main thing we do is design and sell pride merch. We have things like enamel pins, beanies, earrings, socks, backpacks, sling bags, and many more. I design all of the merch myself, and your support really goes a long way to helping us create more content like this. Stay safe, stay loved, and to all those fuckers out there spreading fake science about us, just fucking stop it.